don't tend to do a lot of holiday-themed content. Mostly because my productivity is such that by the time I think of something interesting to do for any given holiday, there isn't enough time to get a video put together for it to become public by the holiday itself. So I've mostly ignored that kind of thing and just put out whatever content I'm currently putting out at the time. This year, however, it just so happens I got an idea that could, conceivably, get a video out each week in October, culminating in Halloween. So, in the spirit of James Rolfe's Monster Madness, Louis Lovehog's Long Box of the Damned, and Bob Chipman's Schlocktober, welcome to another Halloween-themed retrospective done my way. And using another bumper I created for another video, but it is thematically appropriate here. Kids love monsters, and in the heyday of Saturday morning cartoons, there were a lot of monster-themed shows. So this month, we're going to look at 5 different monster-based series that Generation X grew up with, but have, mostly, fallen into relative obscurity. And it's only appropriate that we start in 1980 with one of Hanna-Barbera's lesser-known offerings.
Don't interrupt! I know all about Dr. Dre and the artifacts. I know everything! So what are you doing here? Get to the museum and stake it out! But speaking of steaks, where's my T-bone sandwich? Never mind. Go stop Dr. Dre. Oh, I'm losing my bubbles. Kids today, who needs them? They're nothing but problems.
Drak Pack was a 16-episode, one-season wonder that aired from 1980 to 1981. The opening sequence pretty much spells out the premise of the show. A retired Count Dracula,
known as Big D.
Yeah, get the jokes out now, folks. It's not going to get any less stupid sounding as we go on. Anyway, Dracula has retired from terrorizing the world and has spearheaded an initiative to atone for the misdeeds of the past, and has recruited 3 teenage dudes to do good as the Drak Pack. We have Frankie, who is naturally a descendant of the Frankenstein monster, Howler, the descendant of the Wolfman, and Drak Jr., who, despite the name, is actually Dracula's great-great-nephew. Each of them appear to be half-human, which is why Drak can be out in direct sunlight, and they largely look human until they activate their monster powers with the... oh god... the Drak Whack. No, I'm not kidding. That's what it's called.
Yeah, time for the Drak Whack. Wacko!
In terms of actual powers, Frankie has super strength, which gets even greater when he gets mad, Howler is able to blow out gale force winds, and Drak can fly and shapeshift. At least one of them use their powers in any given episode. Like a lot of Saturday morning cartoons of the era, the show pretty much throws the audience into the deep end and doesn't really have an origin story for the team, instead letting the intro do the heavy lifting in the exposition department. This also has the added benefit of allowing the episodes being rerun without worrying about continuity. With 16 episodes in the season, that gave the network 4 months worth of episodes, with the ability to rerun the whole season 3 times over the course of a year, just in time for the new season, assuming it was renewed. Despite the monster theme, this is basically a comedic superhero show with a static cast. In addition to the Drak Pack, they're opposed by Ogre, the organization of generally rotten enterprises, although the last word was given as endeavors in one episode. Ogre consists of 5 members: leader Dr. Dread, Toad, Fly, Mummy Man, and Vampira. Again, much like the Drak Pack themselves, despite also being monsters, Ogre is pretty much just a gang of supercriminals out to lie, cheat, steal, and be, well, generally rotten. Again, this was 1980, and in cartoons, bad guys were simply bad guys for the sake of being bad guys. The format of each episode was mostly the same. Dr. Dread comes up with some harebrained, cartoonish scheme, the Drak Pack find out about it, and assorted shenanigans ensue, usually with the pack winding up captured in the obligatory death trap before escaping and eventually foiling whatever scheme is going on. Where this gets weird is that most of the time, it's Dread himself that tells them what's going on, usually by calling Drak Jr. for a solo meeting.
Yes, operator. I'll accept the call. All right, Dr. Dread. What's on your twisted evil mind? Another of your mysterioso meetings, huh? All right, I'll be there.
And Drak apparently has no sense of pattern recognition because these meetings always end with Dread putting him in some kind of peril, which he quickly gets out of. And then in the next episode, it happens all over again. Which brings us to the main thing you need to take away about this show if you decide to check it out. Like many Hanna-Barbera cartoons of the era with a comedy focus, every character is an idiot to one degree or another. Yes, even the supposedly smart characters like Dracula.
Do something! Oh boy, this place is as cold as a tomb. Oh, it's tonight.
It took me a couple of episodes to figure it out, but I finally got a handle on the show when I figured out the specific types of idiots the members of the Drak Pack were. Frankie is your typical big dumb galoot, Howler the obligatory slacker, and things finally clicked when I realized that Drak, from his voice to his dialogue, is meant to essentially be a teenage Maxwell Smart. He's overconfident, convinced he's more capable than he is, and puts a lot of stock in seeming unflappable. Seen through this lens, Drak Pack becomes a lot more enjoyable to watch. Everybody's a moron, so just sit back and let it wash over you. And once you do that, you begin to appreciate other things about the show. The production was actually done at Hanna-Barbera Pty, which was the studio's Australian division. I don't know if they had more time than your usual Hanna-Barbera production, or if things are just done differently there, or what. But the animation in Drak Pack, while still clearly on a budget, seems to be animated a little bit better than the usual fare you'd get from them. Remember, this was 1980, and Hanna-Barbera was pretty much producing nearly 80% of all animated network television at the time, so quality tended to suffer. But Drak Pack seems to have a little more going for it. Oh, there are the occasional rushed elements, but sometimes the animation is a lot smoother than you usually get from cartoons of this era. But where the show really stands out is the voice cast. You have Hanna-Barbera regulars like Don Messick, Chuck McCann, and Julie McWhirter, of course, but Jerry Dexter turns in a pretty entertaining performance as Drak Jr., while William Calloway pulls double duty as both Frankie and Howler. However, the big gets in terms of voice acting in this show goes to Alan Skeletor Oppenheimer as Dracula.
Don't call me Big D. I am your great Uncle Dracula. Now, the whole world is waiting to see if Ogre succeeds in getting into the grimmest book of records. What have you done to stop Dr. Dread?
Well, nothing yet, sir. He hasn't committed any crime yet.
Excuses, excuses.
And Hans Conried as Dr. Dread. Just him being involved in the show at all automatically elevates the quality of the acting considerably, even if he does seem to occasionally forget that he's not voicing Captain Hook again.
Ogre, where are you?
What do you want?
Catch me, you flitwit!
Don't get upset, Dr. Dre.
Now get me out of here!
I heard on my superpower.
Oh no! Bit off by one of me own mob!
This was one of Conried's last roles before his death in 1982, and it was clear he could do a show like this in his sleep. Just about every scene with Dr. Dread is a highlight of the show, and also where the writers clearly felt most of the comedy came from. The Drak Pack is almost completely incidental in their own show, because Ogre could carry this entire thing on their own, just having misadventures while committing crimes. But because this was the beginning of the 80s, no, you couldn't have the bad guys be the focus of the show anymore, because the kids watching would turn into hooligans or some such nonsense. Oh, and before you bring up Dick Dastardly and Muttley having their own show, that was about a decade earlier, and the rules for kids' TV content hadn't yet shifted over to the all shows must teach good moral values to the audience standard yet. Drak Pack isn't quite as bad on that front as later shows would be, where the heroes all became such paragons of virtue that they lost any actual cool factor they might have had, while the villains became the real standouts of 80s cartoons. But yeah, Ogre are the bigger draws here, and the need for heroes for them to fight seems almost incidental. The show only lasted one season and pretty much faded into obscurity almost immediately. It did get a DVD release a few years ago, but copies these days are few and far between. Drak Pack isn't the best original project from Hanna-Barbera, but it's certainly one of the more unusual entries in monster-themed cartoons from this era. Check it out sometime if you're curious. Next time, something a little more traditional in terms of how can we make monsters palatable for parents and network executives worried about what kids see in their cartoons. We've only just begun here, folks, and I think you'll like what's coming up in future installments. We'll see you next week.
Bad, dude. Bad.